Hello and welcome back to Highway to Hoover, a production of SEC Extra and D1Baseball.com. I'm your host, Joe Healy, joined as always by my good friend and co-host, Mark Etheridge, who is sporting the Kendall Rogers I Hate Your Team t-shirt. If you're watching on video here, you can have one of those of your own if you'd like. Head over to the D1 Baseball store and get yourself one of those. That's, I imagine, I don't know, like what's our best seller in our shop, Mark, but I have to imagine that shirt has got to be it.
And they have different colors. I mean,
yeah,
I'm sporting the green here. That's what I went with because it goes with
there you go.
The logo. But I do feel like, it's really versatile. I mean, if you got that I hate your team spirit, I mean, you can go in a lot of different directions. It really goes with anything. Like formal wear, wear it to weddings, funerals. I mean, you're covered.
Yeah, mitzvahs, both bar and bot.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, all of the above.
Yeah.
So go ahead, go get yourself one of those. Good to see Mark sporting the merch there. Real quick before we get going, as always, this episode of Highway to Hoover is brought to you by Academy Sports and Outdoors. The sun's out and the fun is on at Academy Sports and Outdoors. Score a cool pool, savor summer flavor with a grill, prep for fishing weekends, or mount up with a new mountain bike. However you have fun, you can't lose with our top brands. Gear up online at academy.com or at your local store. All right, Mark and I are officially in off-season mode at this point.
Yeah.
Staying busy, but I had Team USA and the Cape. Mark's plugging away at some of the roster reconstruction stuff, working hard in the background to try to put the puzzle pieces together after the portal and the draft and all that stuff. And we'll talk about some of that stuff today, but just because it's the off season doesn't mean we don't have things going on. But it is the time of year when this is kind of what you do this time of year. It's you're kind of laying the groundwork, if you will, for the type of stuff we'll use moving forward. And obviously a big building block in that was the draft, which took place over the weekend. We're going to talk about some of the highlights from that, the big headlines, what caught Mark and I's attention. What we're not going to do, probably just to create an expectation here, is Mark and I are not experts in recruiting or prep prospects or any of that. So we're not going to lie to you and get over our skis and tell you about how these freshmen are going to fit in necessarily, because I don't know. I have to have conversations with coaches, with scouts, just to kind of figure that out. But we will talk about the big names that got to campus, just talk about them getting there, maybe some of the players that, got missed out on, talk about the guys back to campus, just a little potpourri of things we found interesting over draft, 2 days of the draft, Sunday and Monday, a little bit of a different format this time around. Mark provided a very important service on day one of the draft by sending the picks to me over DM, because I was on the Cape, which is lovely. I'm not complaining about that. But I was at one of the Cape ballparks that the cell service, I mean, you might as well be on the moon in terms of cell service. So I couldn't get Twitter to load real well. I certainly was not going to get a live stream to load. So we went old school, and Mark was just texting the picks one by one to me. So that was kind of like one of those 1-900 services back in the day, Mark.
Yeah.
You could call and get draft information and
Forrest Davis.
Yeah. So but let's dive into it, Mark. I want to start with kind of big picture takeaways. I'll toss it to you here in a second, but for me, from a holistic standpoint, I did find it interesting that there's been this consistent trend towards more and more college players at the top of the draft. And this year was a little bit of a return, to prep players at the top. And I don't think that is some sort of like knock against the college game. I don't think tastes have changed. I just think that's what this class dictated, that there weren't necessarily the Jack Cagliones and Paul Skeens or Dylan Cruz or Travis Bazana or, those types of players at the top of this draft. And the strength of this college class was depth. And I think you saw that once we got past the top, 20, 25 picks, it started to become college heavy. But that was interesting to me, just that, because I think we've learned that, yes, I think organizations are becoming more and more interested in drafting college players at the top of the draft, but not in a situation where they're taking a lesser player. Like they're not, being a college player does not trump, what they still think the upside is. So that was just kind of an interesting wrinkle, that it kind of felt like we were just living in this world where, 7 of the top 10 picks or whatever were going to be college guys. And that was different this year. And it just kind of interesting. So take wherever you want to go, Mark, with just kind of a big picture takeaway from the draft for you.
I'm fascinated to see how with the House settlement, the full scholarships plus NIL that's available. Certainly it's not going to impact the top of the draft, but as we move down further and the money is not as robust, certainly there's more of a decision to make this year than there has been in years past. What does that look like? And I don't think anybody really knows at this point, but I do think there's an opportunity for players that maybe from a mental standpoint would benefit from college. Either they're an academic type of person, or they could use that structure that comes with the whole college experience and finding yourself and all of those advantages that the college life gives you versus, jumping straight into minor leagues at 19 where you really got to become an adult. And I'm curious, everybody's different, but I do feel like there's an opportunity for players, for us from a college standpoint, to get players that might not have been here in years past. So that's going to be fascinating because we did see, there's a lot of budget picks where, the pro team takes a guy early who will sign for less to save more money to take a flyer late. And you saw a lot of the top pro prospects that are going to college, at least right now. Somebody throws it out there in the 18th, 19th, or 20th, and we'll see how much money's left after we go through and sign everybody else. And if it's enough, maybe we can tempt this guy. And I feel like that's going to be the thing to watch these next 2 weeks, because you had some really top name guys who, if they come to college, are going to be the stars we talk about for the next 2 or 3 years. But a lot of them are going to have to say no to some serious money. And that's going to be, we'll follow it as close as anyone, but that's going to be really the storyline these next couple of weeks.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think it's kind of unknowable exactly how it's going to play out, because I think it cuts a couple of different ways, because I also think there's so much uncertainty about what the landscape is going to look like moving forward that, generally speaking, there is less money getting thrown around in general. Maybe not at the top end, but because teams are holding on to money. I shouldn't say teams. Universities are holding on to money, and athletic departments are holding on to money because they don't know any better.
There's so much uncertainty.
Right. Yeah. They might need that dollar later. So there's kind of less, money floating around for those. Again, not for the top of the draft from a pro perspective, and not even from an NIL perspective for those guys who are just clearly not big time prospects but are good college players. Those guys are fine. It's those fringy guys on both ends, the guys who, 12 to 15 rounds on talent anyway, like really nice college player, has value to their club, but also is just good enough to maybe be a guy you could squint and see a future big leaguer there. Like, it's those guys that are probably having to make the toughest decisions. Yeah. And that's where maybe the money might be a little different. Because I think about a guy like, David Mershon at Mississippi State last year, where I forget what round he was, but it was in the teens. And it was just like, he was the last, I don't want to say the last, but one of the last guys that I was monitoring last year. And the Angels had money left over.
Because of Ryan Prager.
Right, because of Ryan Prager. That's right. Yeah. And so they just they're like, all right, well, we got to spend this money somewhere. And it's David Mershon, who is, again, like that fringy kind of guy. Very good college player. State would have loved to have had him back.
Oh, yeah.
But just a good enough prospect to where it's like, well, they're paying me over slot, and he is a toolsy guy. So, he felt like he had to make the move. And so it's those types of guys where we're having these discussions. And I just wonder if that, maybe not so much for the high school guy that got drafted in that round, but the returning college guys that got drafted, let's say rounds 13 to 20, where maybe that equation is a little bit more imbalanced than it was. Because it's just been kind of understood that, hey, these guys can make decent money playing SEC baseball now. And so if you're an MLB organization, if you're going to draft them, you got to know that you're not just bidding against yourself and your bonus pool. You're bidding against their college program, and I just wonder if there'll be less of that this time around. But we can't know that. Which,
and along those same lines, I mean, we saw guys who certainly draftable in some cases would be high draft choices remove themselves from the draft, either formally or informally, and decide to come back to school. Like a Trey Phelps or Brandon Arvidsson did it. Hunter Elliott did it. I mean, guys that certainly, you'd love to have them in your organization, but they're going to come back. They're betting on themselves, or they prefer college, or whatever their particular situation is, and they're going to be back. And that's for in our situation, that's great because we're going to get to watch them for another year. But it's fascinating because while that has happened in the past, it happened a whole lot more this year. And I do feel like it's just how much change is going on outside of NIL, how the draft is changed, is shortened to 20 rounds now. There's just more opportunities for guys to delay professional baseball compared to the way it used to be.
Quickly, just kind of recapping, because I know this is of interest to people in general. Conference-wise, SEC had 107 players picked. Next highest was ACC at 61. And then if you want to take top 10 rounds, which those tend to be the higher priority guys, either the elite guys and then the senior signs, which tend to be a lot of the good college player type guys. SEC had 70 in the top 10 rounds, ACC 35, Big 12 34, so about double what those two leagues had. And that's why, this is always the first argument I make when people talk, when people want to do the comparison shopping between conferences, because, maybe D1 baseball and whoever else in the media, maybe we are biased against the SEC. I'm not saying we are. I'm just saying that, like, if you want to make that argument, if you want to make that argument, okay, whatever, like, we're not, but it just is what it is. But MLB organizations have no motivation to draft anybody except the guys they think are the best players. Like, they're not doing it because they had SEC patches on their sleeves. Like, every year players get drafted out of schools I have never heard of. And so if those types of players can get drafted, they truly do not care where they come from, as long as they think they're good enough. And so, like, this is what I point to when we talk about conference quality. And I'm not a huge fan of that whole discussion, to be honest with you, because I just don't, it doesn't serve any that's not how we keep score in this sport. But this is what I point to when somebody in good faith wants to have the conversation. Like, this is usually where I point them, is like, look at the draft picks, because there is no motivation for those teams other than we want the best players who we think can be big leaguers.
Yeah. And I think it means even less now that with the free transfers, you're on one team 1 year and then one conference, and then you jump to another one and you jump to another one. It's just where you landed at the end. Oh, that conference gets credit for that draft choice, right?
Right.
So maybe at some point it meant more than it does now, but for me, that's fair. That's immaterial. I do feel like that you look at it from a program standpoint, and a lot of the top programs that continue to put guys into the league, and a lot of them, they sign themselves. But if you look, there's a lot of these guys they plug from elsewhere, and those are the ones getting drafted too. So it just goes to show you who's able to acquire the talent, where the kids want to play. And then what did you do with all that talent? Were you had all these guys drafted, were you able to have success over the time that they were in school? And I do feel like those are the things that we're going to look at, and we can take from this data that we acquired this week.
Yeah, it's my favorite are the guys who are transferring, have actively committed somewhere else out of the transfer portal, and then they get drafted. And they're like, never mind, I'm going to sign. So they never actually played at the new place, but they, it's just always a. And
there were some good ones, that SEC teams lost this week. Would have figured prominently into their plans, and not anymore.
Yeah, we will certainly get into just some stuff like that. So let's move into some specifics here, Mark. I think for me, the team that stands out most in terms of just there was a lot happening was Tennessee. Yeah. And normally you'd look at all these guys they lost, and I think that there is a negative there, right? You're gonna have to replace guys, but A, that's the cost of doing business in the SEC, and then B, when you've done it as well as Tennessee and LSU, there are others. I'm not just singling out Tennessee, but when you've done it as well as they have, it is just incredible marketing for your program. You know, the Tennessee had four first rounders, 8 in the top 3 rounds, and you can add that on to the last, 4 or 5 years of what they've done in the draft, and it's just an incredible piece of marketing. You don't really have to. I mean, that sells itself, right?
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to be a genius recruiter to be able to sell that aspect.
And then Tony's on the draft podcast. Right?
That doesn't hurt either. He's good.
Yeah.
Like, I think even someone who is inclined to not care for Tony V would have to admit that he's pretty compelling television, and he's it's not just that he's a character. And as a matter of fact, I would say on the broadcast he's actually fairly straightforward and straight-laced. Like, it's not like he's out there doing shtick,
right.
Playing a character. Like, he's just giving you analysis, and it's good stuff. I enjoy it when he's in the broadcast.
Yeah. But he's an interesting guy to talk to. I mean, he's articulate. He uses the right word at the right time, and he also throws in some humor or sometimes a shock value, whatever it happens to be. It's great in our role because we get interesting things to write about. But I do think that he understands when to turn it on and when to play it straight. And certainly there was a nice mix of that on the broadcast the other night.
Yeah, that's well put. On the flip side, look, Cruz Schoolcraft got popped in the first round. That was a guy that, they had some guys they just knew they weren't getting. And every SEC team has guys like that. But he was a guy that there was some optimism they might be able to get if the numbers weren't right. But all it takes is one team to fall in love and pop the guy. So that happens, and that's, that was a bummer for Tennessee, but they did get Cameron Appenzeller to campus, Trent Grindlinger, a catcher, to campus, and this is how you build it, right? You need to hit on some of these blue chip guys that decide they want to develop in college versus starting a pro career, and it's no guarantee. Cam Johnson for LSU was one of those guys 2 years ago, and that has not panned out for, didn't at LSU and now at Oklahoma it hasn't. So it's not a guarantee of anything, but that's an important building block in this 2025, 2026 version of the SEC, that to win at a national title level, you have to have some of these guys who decided pro ball can wait. I'm going to go the college route. You need those kind of talents.
You do. And certainly, they had Billy Carlson, they had Steele Hall, they had 2 elite shortstops, and you sign those guys. And at the time you sign them, you expect they're going to be high choices, but you don't really know what's going to happen, right? Because like Jack Caglione was one of these guys who was never going to make it to school. He got hurt, and then all of a sudden he's there for 3 years and sets all kinds of records, right? So you just never know. And I feel like that's why everybody asks, why do you sign these guys that we're going to go pro? Because you sign them so early. There's so much time. You just don't. You can't see where they're going to project in 2 years typically. I think the other thing, just looking at the balls, well, really 2 things. The first is their portal class. It did get hit pretty hard from the draft. I mean, DJ Newman from Bowling Green, Mason Estrada from MIT, Clay Edmondson from Asheville, Matt Barr from SUNY Niagara, all were drafted. I don't know, but they were all drafted high enough that they could sign. And then Ethan Moore, who's a top shortstop, somebody took a flyer on him, just like you mentioned Appenzeller earlier. Somebody takes that late inning flyer. You don't know how much money's going to be left. I know what they're saying today, but it's not over till it's over, right? And those are the things that we're going to be watching. The other thing to point out is Dalton Bargo did not get drafted. He will return. Reese Chapman will return. Brandon Arvidsson will return. Those are big pieces that a lot of us felt like would not be part of next year's team. So along with all this new talent that they're bringing in, they're going to have some holdovers and culture builders and all those kinds of things that you need in order to have success. And really, we didn't expect any of those 3 to be back.
Yeah, and they get I was looking at your spreadsheet, Mark. So pardon me if you mentioned his name, but Henry Ford, they weren't sure.
That's a huge miss. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they weren't sure that nobody was sure that he was going to make it to Knoxville. I mean, he's a high-end recruit as an eligible sophomore out of Virginia in his own right. But he gets through and is headed to Knoxville. So again,
and of the draftable players, he might be the top one returning.
Yeah, I think
he just might be
right. Yeah,
of the guys who were draft eligible. Yeah,
the guy can really hit. And go look at his numbers. And Vol fans know this, but like last year was thought of as being kind of a down year for him. And just go look at the numbers and look at what a down year was, because it was still pretty impressive. I think he hit 360 or something. Like, it's just anyway. So a mix. I don't even want to say a mixed bag for them. I think it was very positive for the Vols. Like I think when you are fishing in the ponds they are for players, you're just like every year you're going to have a player that breaks your heart. Like, I just think that's the way it goes. And we'll see on the transfer guys. That's probably going to be, you pick any four of them, two go one way, two go the other. That kind of feels like that's always the way that goes. So we'll just have to kind of wait and see on that. Because it comes down to what we talked about early, right? Where it's like, especially some of these senior guys, like that have been around college baseball for a while. Do you just get the 10 grand, or do they like you a little more than that? Or do you get way over slot because they have money to spend and they got to spend it somewhere? Like, that's just going to probably play a huge role. And
in today's world, they're going to get more than that with NIL.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah. You would certainly think with some of these higher profile guys. Mississippi State also, not as much happening with them. But there was a big name in Jack Bauer. Once we got past, with Bauer in particular, once we got past the second round, it was kind of like, okay. And this is the baseball draft. Like, the MLB draft does not do itself any favors with trying to be like, you and I can follow it because we kind of understand the ebbs and flows. But with these high profile high school guys, if they don't get taken in the first couple of rounds, then we're waiting for round 11.
11th. Yeah.
It's just like, that is, if you try to explain that, which I have tried, if you try to explain that to someone who doesn't follow it, you sound ridiculous. And it's one of the reasons why they say, how can we get the college baseball draft to be MLB draft to be a bigger deal? And I'm like, I just don't think you can in this current format, anyway, that's an aside, that discussion for a later day. But once you got past the first couple rounds, you waited till, round 11 to see if somebody would make a last ditch effort for Jack Bauer. And the answer was no. And so his commitment to Mississippi State was strong enough to get him through. And again, that's the type of guy that could be a program changer for him.
And that's going to be so fascinating, because just for people who don't know, he's a 6'4" lefty, and he's been clocked up to 103 miles an hour as a high schooler. That's just unheard of. So now he's going to fill out in a college strength and conditioning program, conceivably get stronger, create more velocity. But he's not a polished pitcher, right? He's at this point, he's still all velo, and he does have. I think he's got two pretty. Other than the fastball, he's got a pretty good slider. But I feel like as you grow and as you are able to mature in this college environment, I would think maybe you run him out there in midweeks or something like that and let him pitch a little bit. I think that's where he gains experience, and it's just going to be fascinating to watch, because seeing a guy, especially a lefty, throw that hard. I mean, especially lefties, how many lefties in the world throw that hard? I mean, it's a short list, maybe on one hand. Yeah. So when you have a guy like that, and he's still got some maturing to do. So that's going to be fascinating to watch as we see what he looks like over the course of his time in Starkville. I think the other one, you had the Parker twins from Purvis, Mississippi. Yeah. JoJo goes in the first round. We all knew he would, and he's going to sign. But twin brother Jacob, he's a really good prospect as well. Not considered as high a draft choice as his brother JoJo, but because he slid a little bit and then he slid a lot, he ended up not getting taken until I think it's the 18th, 19th round, something like that.
Yeah.
So all indications are he's heading to Starkville. Again, you don't know what's going to happen these next couple of weeks. Somebody's going to throw some money at him. He'll still have a decision to make. But all indications are they're going to get two of the top prep prospects to make it to college in Bauer and Parker, and that's huge. right? Because you have a new coach coming in. There's already a ton of excitement, and then you're able to land two of the top guys. I think the other part for Mississippi State, they were able to Ben Davis, who was a really good reliever from last year, removed himself from the draft, so he'll be back. They didn't really lose any of their portal guys. A lot of those were draft eligible. I feel like that they made out pretty well. I mean, Pico Khan, Evan Sierra, we knew they were going to go. Luke Dodson was in the portal anyway. Nate Williams is an older guy. It was time for him to go probably. I feel like that they made out about as well as they could, from in the draft this weekend.
Yeah, and of course, in addition to, I mean, we knew that even if the draft had not really gone their way, that they were going to have an extremely talented roster just with, the guys that, have come over from Virginia. And, so,
and A3's coming back.
For sure. Yeah. So we knew they were going to be in a good spot, and they got into an even better spot with the way the draft played out. And I can see it now. I'm going to have a lot of trouble messing up the names of Jacob Parker and Justin Parker, the pitching coach. That's going to be something that happens a ton. Yeah. So looking forward to that. Yeah.
At least JoJo went pro.
That's true. We did not need a third.
Good for us.
Yeah, we did not need a third Parker in the mix. That is for sure. LSU is interesting to me too, Mark. Lost a bunch of recruits, but it's hard for me, and I'd be curious for like you and I don't have this, but the perspective like on the ground, around the program of like how many of those guys were like, did you really think might make it though? Right. Like I'd be interested for like an honest assessment of that. Cause otherwise it's hard to be too bummed out about it if you're an LSU. I mean, you'd love to have them, but you just kind of know that's what's going to happen there. And even if they did think there were some guys there they maybe could have gotten in another world, they've just gone out in the portal the last couple of days and just grabbed some of the last remaining like really high end guys. When you talk about Cooper Moore from Kansas, Trent Caraway from Oregon State, a guy who, oh by the way, like very easily could have gotten drafted and signed this offseason.
Top 100 pick.
Zach York from Grand Canyon, great pure hitter. Dax Stafey from Angelo State, one of the best D2 pitchers in the country. That's just all in the last couple of days since the draft has ended. So if there were holes to fill based on guys not getting to campus, I would suspect some of these guys are the guys that filled them.
Yeah. Well, LSU had eight prep signees drafted, but they had 12 in the top 150. So that means they've got 4 guys, top 150 prep recruits heading to campus. And you take that, but you had to sign 12 to get the 4. But and I think that's really fascinating to see how that math works, because you're not going to get most of them, because these are some of the top players in the country, and they all have to sign somewhere, even if everyone kind of knows they're not going to college. But they got 4 of them in college. So it's going to be really fascinating. I mean, Omar Cerna removed himself from the draft. Reagan Ricken, pitcher. Marcos Paz, really, really good pitcher as well. And then who am I missing? William Patrick, an outfielder. All 4 of those guys will have a chance. And LSU's going to have a crowded lineup once again. I mean, you're going to be really good if you find time in that lineup, because you mentioned the portal players are bringing in, and LSU got a late start. That's the deal with, you play until the championship weekend. Everyone's 1, 2, 3 weeks ahead of you in the portal trying to get players, and a lot of guys have made their decisions before you're really able to get to really focus on it. So they've been able to get Trent Caraway, as you mentioned, from Oregon State, Zach Yorkie, Grand Canyon, Cooper Moore from Kansas. I mean, those are all players that should have a chance to have major contributions. Braden Simpson, a guy from High Point, brought in. I mean, he may be the second baseman. I mean, so they've certainly got holes to fill, but with all of these incoming players, I mean, LSU's going to be good again. Shocker.
Yeah. Stop us if you've heard that before. Yeah, it's an interesting group. Cooper Moore, strikes me as a guy who maybe does a little bit of what Zach Cowan did this year. Now he could start. He started at Kansas, on a regional team, but it's it's a two seam, like it's a ground ball type of approach. And, does he end up being a bulk innings relief guy? Like it's really versatile arm, and, pure hitters with York. And so I like the individual pieces. But you're right. It's going to be another, you just know as a player when you go to LSU, like with a handful of exceptions, like especially with these transfers, you just know like you're taking a little bit of a risk by going there, because like Jay and his staff do a great job. We've talked about it before, of using the whole roster, but that doesn't mean you're going to get a ton of at bats, or innings. You gotta earn all that, and everybody around just good. And so there is a little risk involved. And so I credit these guys for, betting on themselves that, hey, I can be a guy at LSU, but also somebody in this mix is going to get, once the music stops, they're not going to have a chair, metaphorically speaking. And
like Micah Bucknam, who was there at LSU, really didn't play much, goes to DBU, and he's, their best pitcher, and gets drafted really highly.
Yep. Sam Dutton, same thing. Didn't get drafted as high, but certainly was a big part of Auburn season. Yep. So that's exactly right. Like somebody will be those guys again. That's just the way the deal works. Just some other various thoughts, Mark. My mind goes to Kentucky. I thought Kentucky was interesting, and we've talked about how this is a program now trying to, like the last 3 years have so much been about just like stair-step progress. And, they get back to a super, then they get to Omaha, and, oh, by the way, go to a regional for a second straight year for the first time. Then they they get to regionals for a third straight year. And now they're starting to get players like Tyler Bell, and they had some blue chip guys committed in this class, and getting some of those guys to campus would be, kind of another one of those stair steps. And they did get Owen Jenkins, a really talented catcher, to campus. That's big. And he was, even as he was considered a really highly regarded prospect, there was throughout the entire process a lot of optimism that he was going to make it to campus, and he did. But they did lose Jace Mitchell, Connor Essenberg, a couple of other highly talented freshmen. Caden Eschman, a transfer from Northern Kentucky, has pitched extremely well in the Cape. Got drafted in the 12th round. It was always kind of considered a long shot to get him to campus, so I'm going to assume that he's going to sign. They did get Tyler Cerny, though, to campus, Indiana shortstop, who's been very, very good at Indiana. He's exactly – now he ain't going to play shortstop at Kentucky. He's going to have to – I'm guessing he'll be at third base, just given, that second base you return – you return starters at second and short. Right. So but a really productive player. So would Kentucky have loved to have gotten another one of those? They thought there was a chance they'd get Connor Essenberg, mostly because he wants to be a two-way player, and you might not get that opportunity at the next level. There was some thought they might be able to get him. It does not appear that's going to be the case. So you would have loved to have had more of those guys. But, if Tyler Cerny is your consolation prize as a one-year stopgap, like that's not bad, because he is a productive player at a good program at Indiana.
Yeah, good call. I mean, I really like Kentucky's lineup, especially on the mound. So I feel like if they could have added, another piece, another, say, middle lineup kind of guy, that would have been just that, that little bit of lanyap that I feel like that they could use. But yeah, I'm with you. I think another one, a team that made out pretty well in the draft, is Alabama. They lost Richie Bonamalo, who they knew they would. But they got Zane Adams back. They got Tyler Fay back. Those were two guys that most of us felt were going to be drafted. Jason Torres, Brady Neal, Bryce Fowler, all those guys were draftable and did not get drafted for various reasons and decided to come back. And then on the prep side, Caleb Barnett, two-way player, has a chance to be an absolute star. Drafted late, one of these flyer picks at the end, 19th round. What happens there? Same thing with Miles Upchurch, who's a hard-throwing pitcher. Again, 19th round. Mikhail Holden, 20th round. These are really – Alabama, they thought they were losing pretty much the whole rotation with Quick, Adams, and Fay. They get Adams and Fay back. And now they've got an opportunity for some of these freshmen to come in and really help them. And I feel like they made out pretty well in the draft. Another one I'll point out real quick is Auburn. I felt like you know, I didn't know what would happen with Auburn in the draft. They did lose Cam Tilly. He went early. Cade Fisher went late. So what happens there? He went in the 18th round. He had a big NIL deal. What happens there? Not sure. Dylan Watts did go, so that they lost him. But it's a lineup that's got a ton coming back, so they don't need a lot. But they were able to get Ethan Benjamin, who's one of those Corona kids. One of they had 4 or 5 drafted off that great team out there, and he's a two-way guy, and he was drafted with a flyer pick late. He comes in, he could be their next freshman phenom. They'll play freshmen, so that could be a difference maker for them.
Yeah, it's a good call. It took me a minute to realize, I thought you meant COVID with Corona, and you meant Corona High School in California.
Yeah.
But yes, that was a juggernaut of a high school team out there at Corona, California. Oklahoma is interesting to me because when we talk about some of these guys that could kind of go either way, I look at the sheet you prepared, and they've got 4 pitchers who got drafted 13, 14, 14, and 20. In terms of their rounds, and maybe some of those are just flyers. Again, Mark and I, we don't know the recruiting landscape. We're not going to lie to you about it. But if they're not just flyers, if they're legitimate, hey, we might sign this guy, that could have a huge bearing on what their pitching staff looks like moving forward. They have a JUCO catcher, Brennan Brock, who got drafted in the 14th round. So they do have some of these tweener guys, and for a team like Oklahoma that. They play some in the portal, but they're not one of the heavier portal teams. They're trying to build this a little more organically. And so getting some of these guys who are those fringy, cases back to campus or to campus for the first time, I think is really big for a program like that. And then I will throw a former Big 12 rival of Oklahoma. I'll throw Missouri out there because, and I bring up Missouri specifically to say, I said earlier in the show, every SEC team has somebody who breaks their heart. And so you might wonder why you're bringing up Missouri. Well, they had a high school recruit, Camden Lohman, get drafted in the 8th round, like a big time arm that, for a program like Missouri, you get somebody like him to campus. And especially with they're trying to claw their way out of this hole, every guy matters. And so they lose a guy as an 8th round pick. They probably were just starting to wonder if, hey, maybe do we get this guy to campus? And maybe they still will, who knows? But it doesn't seem like it. And they had a couple of other interesting things. So Sam Horn drafted in the 17th round. How much does he still want to do the football thing is probably going to play a role in that. So there's that. Jacob Pruitt, who's transferring from Mississippi State to Missouri, got popped in the 15th round. That's another one of those fringy ones. Jackson Lovich went in the 16th round. And I think, he's probably a guy who's ready to get things started on the pro side, but who knows? But I bring it up because with Missouri trying to do what they're doing and get back to respectability in the SEC, if they get Sam Horn back and Jacob Pruitt comes to campus, that shores up their pitching staff. Not all the way, but that goes a long way towards shoring some things up. A healthy Sam Horn, and then a guy in Jacob Pruitt who, didn't go great at State last year, but with the SEC experience and was good at Indiana State before that, that could be huge for them. So everybody, it's a sliding scale. Everyone's working on their roster, and the draft is just a tricky thing for 1 through 16 in the SEC. So I bring up Missouri just because you might not think there was a whole lot cooking there from the outside looking in, but when you look under the hood, they've got some important decisions coming up too.
Right. One we didn't talk about is Shane Sadeo. I mean, was injured. Was going to be one of A&M's best pitchers. Although they had a decent staff as it was last year, missed a whole year with an injury. And could have gone in the draft and opted to come back. And now he'll be the A&M ace. And as they rebuild their staff, they lost all 3 to the draft. So that's huge for them. Their top pitching recruit, Johnny Slowinski, got picked in the 3rd round. You have to figure he's gone. So you get A&M's. It's an interesting year for them. After what happened last year, they returned quite a bit though. There's plenty of talent there, and they've recruited well, and it's going to be fascinating to see. And then you get the shot with Sadeo, it's like found money, man. You didn't expect to get him back. And now here he is, and now you can work down from the top, and when you plug in that Friday night guy. So that was one of the bigger outcomes of the whole draft weekend.
Yeah, no, it's a good call, and there's a ton more that we are, I'm sure, glossing over. But the good news, dear listener, is it? Yeah. Like we really could have done this podcast going team by team and really breaking it down. But the good news is, I will give to our listeners, is though we may have, if you feel like we glossed over too much, trust me when I tell you, Mark, it really is in the background, like in the salt mines right now, like trying to put these rosters together. We are doing, like we did last year, we will have a combination season wrap up / look forward for each team coming out. We typically run those into July, early August. We try to let the draft stuff play out so that we have at least a little bit clearer picture of what the roster is going to look like. So, if you're anxious to kind of get the look at what your team is going to look like, we will have that for you. So never fear, just because we just didn't have the time to talk about all 16 teams here today. We will cover it, I can assure you. And
really, the only, as I've tried to do this different ways over the years, the only way to do it is kind of in real time where you're following it. Otherwise, you miss too much.
Right.
It's really challenging because, we mentioned Texas with getting Luke Harrison and Ruger Riojas and Max Grubbs all deciding to come back, right? That just changes your whole pitching staff. Those kinds of things. And I guess the other thing I would mention is a guy like Brett Crossland for Texas, who we all thought was going to go pro. He's going to be right in there competing for innings. It's going to be really fun. There's so many still portal changes coming. Still a few guys leaving, even though the portal's closed. We're still having guys either they sign free agent contracts or they're graduates or whatever. And then you've got still filling guys in from the portal, and then all the high school stuff, right? And then that's going to move into, you got your roster limits that we really haven't had to deal with as early as we have. What is that going to look like with your designated student athletes and all of these moving pieces? Man, we're going to do the best we can to try to figure all this stuff out as we head into the fall and then get you ready for the season.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, is we're going to make mistakes on this stuff. And so I actually encourage you listeners, I've said this before, but there's a decent chance, especially if y'all are watching us or listening to us in July, there's a chance, you probably know some of the ins and outs of your team better than we do. If we're wrong on something, just tell us, just give, hey, I think you got this guy playing short. He's actually probably going to play third. Okay. Yeah. Because you might have some information we don't, frankly.
And honestly, it's hard to be an expert on 16 teams, and it's, right. and that's just facts.
Yeah. We do the best we can with it, but we do it because we want to give y'all a good picture of it and get ourselves ready for the fall. But it's such a good point, Mark, you bring up about just the roster changes and the designated student athlete piece of it. That's going to be a part of the conversation this fall when we talk to coaches that we just haven't had to have conversations like
right.
that before. So that is going to be inevitably a part of pretty much every conversation we have this fall. So that'll be interesting. I don't know exactly what role that's going to play, but we'll find out in real time, I guess. So, all right, folks, I think that's going to do it for this edition of Highway to Hoover, a production of SEC Extra over at D1Baseball.com. Hang with us through the summer. We got a lot of cool stuff going up. I've, been at Team USA in the Cape. I put some Cape notes up in real time, plenty of SEC players I covered there. You can go check those out on the site. We'll have the Team USA reports coming out. David Seifert kind of runs lead on that, but I chip in with them. So we've got that coming. I just talked about the stuff that Mark and I are going to have coming on the site. We do the Cape Cod prospect reports in the month of August. So those will be coming before you know it. And then speaking of before you know it, we'll have the signing deadline and players on campus, and it really comes at you a lot quicker than you think. But just because this is the summer does not mean we don't have a bunch of good stuff up on the site, because we absolutely do. So make sure you're checking all of that out. If you're not subscribed, I think the code Omaha30 will still get you 30% off. Go ahead and give that a try. But Mark and I would be honored and humbled if you would do so. We've done a wrap-up show for the season, but I don't know if maybe we were remiss in not saying a thank you again for everybody who's been with us this season, the 2025 season. And Mark and I don't take it for granted that we get to earn real American dollars doing this job. And but it's only because you guys care, and that's syrupy and sappy and whatever, but it is true. If you guys didn't subscribe and read this stuff, we wouldn't be able to do it. So we don't take that lightly. We always keep that in mind, and it's why I always say if you see us out at the ballpark, say hello so we can tell you thank you.
Even though we hate your team.
That's right. Well, that's I love all of your teams, by the way. Just for the record, I love all the teams equally, as a matter of fact. And for the parents listening, I love all the players equally too. I love your son just as much as all the others out on the field. I'm just as much of a fan of them as anybody else. But so yeah, just a genuine thank you for following along Highway to Hoover, our written content, weekend waypoints on the weekends for me. It's just a lot of fun doing this, and without you guys, it would be, I don't know, just be Mark and I talking to each other, I guess. So anyway, that is it for this episode. We'll be back semi-weekly, let's call it, most weeks. We'll have some interviews, we'll do some fun stuff, we'll play some games. Should be a lot of fun this off season. So stick around for it. I want to thank Academy Sports and Outdoors for sponsoring this and every episode of Highway to Hoover. Really appreciate them being along for the ride. I want to thank Mark, as always, for joining me, and thank you, the